This trade makes the list in part because Flyers fans and media and people still talk about it. Like, this is like the number one sticking point in the history of the Flyers, is that they traded away Justin Williams for Danny Markov.
In the moment, he was more happy about the player he got rid of.
Yes. Yeah, no question.
It was a weight off his shoulders.
Right away, we told them if there was a deal in Philadelphia, it had to be Rod Brind'Amour. It was twofold. They didn't want to trade him, and he was hurt. He had a broken ankle or a broken foot. And we said, that's fine. We'll just wait. We'll wait till it heals.
Welcome to the Canes Corner Podcast with your host, Adam Gold. The Canes Corner Podcast is a part of the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network. And now, here's Adam.
Welcome to the 25th anniversary Canes Corner Podcast. I am Adam Gold. Appreciate your time as we continue taking a look at the Hurricanes franchise after it left Hartford and moved to North Carolina. And everything has really been about the moment and the years most closely following the move. But as we kind of wind this down, we're going to take a look at the best that this franchise has had to offer. In our final episode, we'll talk about the greatest games that this franchise has ever played in North Carolina as the Carolina Hurricanes. But in this episode, the best transactions, the best trade, the best free agent signings, in some cases, the best re-signings that the franchise has made. 25 years worth of options for us all, and it ranges all the way from 1998 all the way through today. So here's who's with us in this episode. We've got Luke DeCock of the News and Observer. He has covered the Hurricanes. He came here as a beat reporter. He has covered the Hurricanes for 20 plus years. Mike Sundheim, who was at one point an intern with the Hurricanes all the way back before the turn of the century, and is now a vice president of communications. And those two gentlemen join me in studio to talk about the best trades, the best transactions in franchise history as the Carolina Hurricanes. So let's start the ball rolling with Mike Sundheim.
Number 5 is what I believe was Ron Francis's best acquisition.
Okay.
Or best move, aside from the draft. And that was the acquisition of Teuvo Teravainen, June 15th, 2016.
They took the contract of Brian Bickle.
Took the contract of Brian Bickle and got Teuvo Teravainen for a second round pick and a third round pick. He'd also gone to the well with Chicago on a couple other trades around then that I wouldn't have on this list, including one in 2017 to bring in a number 1 netminder.
Yeah, well,
that one's not making it.
That's the thing.
Very liberal use of the phrase number 1.
Yes.
Thoughts on that particular trade, Luke?
Was not on my list, which skews probably a hair older, but totally, up there in terms of best sort of acquisitions without giving up assets. I have zero problem with that being on the list. If I had 6 or 7, that would absolutely be in my top 5.
It was definitely in the hunt for number 5 for me. I thought hard about it because Teuvo is a foundational piece of this group. And, I like to use the phrase, you can't tell the story of without. And I think of this Hurricanes team, you can't tell the story of it without contributions from Teuvo Teravainen, the rare player who got better after signing a big contract.
Agreed.
I mean, how many players get better after signing a big contract?
Some would argue not big enough.
Maybe Teuvo would argue not big enough in retrospect. Well, that's coming. We only have 2 years to figure that out. Luke, what's number 5 on your list?
Number 5 on my list is 2004, Danny Markov for Justin Williams.
Luke didn't make that trade. Jim Rutherford made that trade. So let's get Jim Rutherford's thoughts before we kick it back to Luke.
Well, that was a really good one, and it was all circumstances. Philadelphia was in a real jam. Their defense was really banged up, and they were really short. I think they had 3 or 4 of their top 4 defensemen injured, and they were in a jam. And timing is everything, and as it turned out, the timing was right, where we could go after a younger player. We loved Justin Williams. He played on the junior team in Plymouth, so we knew him inside out. and felt very strong. There were no surprises for us, even to the point of what he's done over his career. This is a player that knows the game inside out as well as any player or any coaches in the league. You can sit with Justin Williams, and he understands that game as well as anybody, and just played such a key role for the Hurricanes over the years.
One of the great steals of all time, really. Danny Markov, you very rarely do you win a trade giving up a defenseman for a forward, but you get a young forward, a future leader for a guy who wasn't a great fit here. And really, this trade makes the list in part because Flyers fans and media and people still talk about it. Like, this is like the number one sticking point in the history of the Flyers, is that they traded away Justin Williams for Danny Markov. That's like everything else the Flyers have done that's dumb and stupid. For some reason, this one sticks out. But I do think it's an example of the kind of trade that you may question at the time, because you are giving up a guy who was playing a lot of minutes on defense for a young winger. But Justin Williams was obviously has become, over the next 18 years, such an important part of this franchise, not that entire 18 years, but over the 18 years, that to me, that was worth including in my five.
Well, when I thought it would be interesting and it would change the list if we added transactions as opposed to just making it trades. Yeah, that trade was easily in the top five. But when I added transactions, it got bumped out because, I mean, there are other things, and maybe it should have still been in the list, but we need to have some variance. I mean, Williams is, a huge part of two eras.
No
and
doubt
maybe
about it.
And maybe another one coming forward.
I did not have that one. It's definitely the best trade involving a player who smoked cigarettes between periods in Hurricanes history. I'll let you guess which one.
I can't we argue that point though? I feel like that's in contention for the best trade involving a player who smokes cigarettes between periods. I
didn't spend enough time around these people at the time, so I don't know. I just don't, but it's great. Now all I'm thinking about is the Len Dawson photo of him in the locker room at halftime for the Chiefs smoking a cigarette, and I think there's a Coke somewhere near him. All right, my number five, which is probably on everybody's list anyway. Sandis Ozolinsh and Byron Ritchie to Florida for Brett Hedican, Kevin Adams, and Thomas Malik. That was the selling point. Thomas Malik, former first-round pick, who I think played a couple of games.
Mallets is pronounced T-S. Thomas Mallets.
Well, it all depends on who you talk to. But you probably have the correct pronunciation. But Hedican, obviously, foundational piece of not only the 02, but the 06 team, and Kevin was obviously a very good player and part of leadership for that team. This might have been skewed by personal relationships.
I had it number two.
Number two?
I had it number two as well.
I'm selling that trade short. Look at that.
I'll just say Jimmy was very happy to tell me he made that trade that day.
Well,
I'll leave out the colorful language, but he was very happy.
Jim Rutherford explains how it all went down.
We were really light on defense, and we acquired him because we needed a puck-moving guy. And he came in, and he played okay for us. But it got to the point where he was a little banged up and wasn't giving us as much as we would have liked. People in our organization said, well, with his contract, you're not going to be able to trade him. And I said, you can't say that. You always have to believe that you can accomplish something. And so anyways, Florida showed interest in him. We were looking at adding different pieces to our team. We were fortunate that we were able to get some real high-quality character guys in Hedican and Adams, and they fit the role that we were looking for. Fit it very well, and so it was a deal that worked out for us.
I had another GM ask me later on that season. Jimmy had made another trade. I can't remember which one. It might have been. I don't think it was
the Sean Hill trade.
I was thinking 06, but yeah, some other trade in the 02 season. And another GM in a press box asked me, "Is Jimmy ever going to stop taking advantage of rookie GMs?"
That's why he's in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah.
It's why he is in the Hall of Fame. What, Mike? Why do you think he was so? I mean, obviously they brought in two very big pieces and character guys.
In the moment, he was more happy about the player he got rid of.
Yes. Yeah. No question.
It was a weight off his shoulders.
He was friends with Irbe, though, right? Wasn't he good friends with Irbe, or wasn't he?
They were countrymen, and they were friends. I don't know that they are still hanging out to this day. But
did I make the mistake that we make when we think all Finns are friends with each other?
Most of them are.
Well, except maybe one who was traded to Florida a few years ago. All right, number 4 for you, Mike, is what?
I have the Ron Francis signing as a free agent in July of 1998 as number 4.
I have it on my list, too. Do you have it on your list, Luke?
I don't. My list was a little more trade focused because that was sort of the original intent. But I don't question the importance of that in terms of legitimizing this franchise.
Why sign a player who was into the sunset of his career? It was an easy call for Jim Rutherford.
We were looking for leadership, character, identity. We felt with the opportunity to add Ronnie, despite the fact where, it was later on in his career, that he could still help us as a player. He was still a good player, and he could change the culture. That was the purpose of that, and it really helped a lot.
More important because in a new market, he was an absolute bona fide superstar?
Yeah, certainly name recognition. Yes, that was also a part of it. I
actually have a different center signing as my most important transaction in franchise history.
Okay, we're going to get to that in a second. I just want to, so we don't have to get into it because it is also on my list. It gave, I think Luke just said it. It gave Carolina, all right, Ron Francis is willing to come here, although he got paid to come here. We didn't come here because there was nothing altruistic about it. But when he got here, it made, okay, I can go there if Francis is going there. And it sort of changed it gave the franchise some gravitas right away. And obviously he was a big part of 2002, and he wouldn't have been here. Wouldn't have been here in 2002. And his second iteration with the organization, I mean, he averaged 60 points a year. It's not bad for a guy who's basically at the end and not necessarily playing with he wasn't playing with Lemieux and Yager anymore.
And during an era where there wasn't a ton of scoring.
Right. I mean, he's still a pretty good player. So, all right, what's number 4 for you, Luke?
Number 4 for me, and I wanted to include one recent move on here, and I think it kind of sums up why the Hurricanes have been successful the last couple of years. That's the Vincent Trocheck trade. You acquire a number 2 center who helps you through a couple seasons for really spare parts. I mean, They were guys who, Lucas Wallmark, nice player. Ida Luuterainen, nice player. These were guys who were just sort of replaceable parts. I mean, a lot like Stephen Lawrence in the Brett Burns trade. It's a guy you like having him on your team. Other teams think he's valuable, but you've got 9 more of them in the AHL. And when you build depth in an organization, then you can make those trades where you trade quantity for quality. And obviously the Hurricanes didn't win as much as they would have liked with Trocheck at center. But, to get a guy like that without really giving up anything, to me, that's sort of one of epitomizes to a certain degree the kind of moves the Hurricanes have made lately that allows them to be successful. I think it's a polar opposite from the Lindholm, Hannafin, Hamilton trade, which was more kind of contract focused. This was basically saying, oh, you like these guys? Well, let's give you 9 of them, and you give us a player who's much better than any of them. And it, sort of like a gaming the system in Madden or NBA 2K. So I kind of wanted to include that because I thought it's a significant sort of element explaining why the franchise has been more successful recently than it was in the era when they only traded with the Blackhawks.
That's fair, but I'm shocked you didn't mention Chase Prisky there. How did Chase Prisky not come up?
Missed opportunity.
Florida native. Went back home. Didn't last long there either.
What? And is Wallmark with an NHL team right now. I think he was playing overseas. I think he went back.
Yep.
He might be playing in the Swedish league, or might even be in the KHL. I'm not sure. I don't know if
I don't advise people to go to the KHL these days.
Probably. Well, they're coming from the KHL now over here. All right. What my number 4, the free agent signing, and this is a heist too. Ray Whitney. They got him because Detroit, when the salary cap was implemented, Detroit had to buy him out because they couldn't fit everybody under the cap, and the Hurricanes got him essentially for pennies on the dollar. Now he cost
late
more,
too,
right?
Late
Very late. So, and Whitney was one of, first of all, selfishly, one of the most fun people to talk with after a game, where he had a great sense of humor. He was a super teammate and a gamer, a total gamer. And I think he was a flat star for the Hurricanes for a long time.
No doubt.
So
it's on my list.
Look at that. Look at that.
I cheated a little bit, though. I combined it with another free agent signing that also happened within 4 days of that.
Interesting story about how that all went down. Coming out of the lockout, Rutherford and then principal owner Peter Carmano spent some time planning out their target of certain players for the 05-06 season. And from here, I'll let Rutherford take over.
We actually met in the Jersey Shore, and the day of free agency, I was driving back to Raleigh, and we knew that Paul Kariya wanted to come to Raleigh. And that kind of took a quick turn. I got that call on that day telling me that he wasn't, he'd made a different decision. He wasn't coming to Raleigh. My wife still talks about this to this day. She knows how mad I was in the car. And then he said, well, that's if he doesn't want to come, I know a player that'll come that'll bring a lot to us. And I phoned Ray Whitney's agent right then, probably within 20 minutes after getting that other news, and signed him right away.
Okay, number 3, I had the free agent signings of Corey Stillman and Ray Whitney, which happened August 2nd and August 6th of 2005. Pretty vividly remember being in New Orleans with my wife for the Ray Whitney acquisition, and all day I'd been told we were signing Paul Kariya.
Forgot about that.
And then that fell through. He went to Nashville, and I think we won that one.
I think he definitely won that one. I don't even remember Paul Kariya with Nashville. I really don't. I don't remember Paul Kariya playing for Nashville.
I definitely remember Ray Whitney with Carolina.
Yes.
Corey Stone was a classic Jimmy Gets His Man signing.
Explain that.
Oh, he tried to trade for Stillman, I think, in the at least twice in the previous 4 years.
Oh, like Andre Kasha.
Yeah, I mean, or Chuck Kobasu, the one that got away. When Jimmy liked a guy, Ian Cole's another one who ended when he signed him in Pittsburgh. He was going to go get him eventually.
Stillman won a cup with Tampa the year before. Well, before the lockout, he won the cup there. Luke, what's number 3 for you?
Number 3 for me is the Doug Weight trade.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that one meant more than Recchi, because that was a statement much earlier in the season that the Hurricanes were in it to win it. And again, another trade where you give up a mess of pottage, Mike Zingamanis, I think Nicholas Nordgren, bunch of guys who you're not going to miss in return for an impact player. And I just remember, this is how long ago it was. We weren't tweeting or posting stuff on the internet quite yet. I remember that morning I was catching a flight to Montreal. The team was catching a flight to Montreal. Jeremy Rutherford in St. Louis called and said they just pulled Doug Weight off the ice. Can you see if Carolina's the destination? And I was able to confirm that. And I'm literally talking to players on the plane. They're telling me who's not getting on, trying to figure out who was going the other direction in the trade. Because if I remember this right, Mike might remember this better. I don't think it was announced by the time the plane took off from Montreal. I feel like that might have happened while you guys were in the air or something. Because I remember writing it up for online, which is a huge deal for us, like at LaGuardia, changing planes on my way to Montreal. But anyway, to me, that for twofold. One, obviously you add a legit NHL All-Star. That's a big deal for a contending team. But it was, again, the statement that it made, that nobody thought Doug Weight was going to the Hurricanes. They were this, franchise that had finished dead last 2 years earlier, and obviously they were a fluke, and this wasn't going to last. But going out and jumping the gun on that, really beating everybody to the auction, and getting him for not much at all, really set the tone. And I really believe at the time and in retrospect, the players on the team took confidence from that had a concrete impact on that team's attitude. Even when Eric Cole got hurt, whatever it was, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month later, no one ever really flinched because there was a feeling that they could do it. And I really believe the Doug Weight trade had a lot to do with that.
As you were telling the story about, did people who boarded the plane, who was coming off the plane, all I could think of was it would have been better if you guys just parachuted guys out of the plane who were in the trade. That would have been tremendous. Why?
It would have worked if the trade had been with Pittsburgh and you could just kick him out the door as you fly overhead.
Let's take a quick break right here and pick up the rest of our best Canes deals on the other side. Lucas Walmart, by the way, is playing in Switzerland and did play in the KHL last season, so I guess I get bonus points. And Paul Correa had 2 pretty good years for the Predators, but I'll take Ray Whitney any day of the week. But my number 3 with a backstory after the break. Welcome back to this 25th anniversary Canes Corner podcast special. Look at the best trades, free agent signings, deals in Carolina Hurricanes history. I'm Adam Gold. I sat down with Hurricanes Vice President of Communications Mike Sundheim and News and Observer columnist Luke DeCock to go over some of the best deals since the move south from Hartford. And I'll pick up with my number 3 deal, which came with a little friction. Brandon Sutter, Brian Dumoulin, and a 2012 first-round pick for Jordan Staal. And the backstory is, and this was the source of, most people have had some breakup with Jim Rutherford before. I know, Luke, you have had a breakup with Jim Rutherford before, correct?
Like one?
Well, right, exactly. So this was mine. And it was really my only one. Actually, I shouldn't say it's my only one. This was the second one. The first one, we didn't really have a relationship at the time, and it just got off to a rocky start. This one, Jim and I were really good friends for as much as I can be friends with Jim Rutherford. And he got mad at me and would not talk to me for a year and a half.
I don't have fights. I respect everybody's opinion. So I just want to straighten that out. I have no qualms with you or anybody else. Anyways, the Penguins wanted to keep him. He wanted to leave. I was aware of that. They had offered him the same contract that we ended up giving him, which always, when you're talking that kind of term and money, that can be controversial. Big center iceman, two-way player, terrific character at a really young age, and this is the kind of player you can win cups with. Now, it hasn't happened yet, but he's still there in Carolina, and he's going to give the Hurricanes a better chance to win the cup, just as he did every year that he's been there. Terrific person.
When the trade was executed, and I will admit that it was probably personal because I really liked Brandon Sutter. His dad, Brent, was my favorite player as an Islander growing up. And I saw in Sutter what Staal was, but just a couple of years behind. And I thought, well, didn't you give up a lot for Jordan Staal? And when we were done with the interview, Jimmy called my phone and left an angry voicemail message about how every GM keeps calling me and telling me why we stole Jordan Staal from Pittsburgh. I'm like, and that was it. And we did not speak for, it had to be a year and a half.
He loved that one. Every other GM is telling me what a great trade this is. I must have heard that 11 times.
Exactly, but it was a great trade. He's the favorite player of the head coach now.
No doubt.
We don't like the phrase teacher's pet, but has Jordan Stahl ever done something wrong in the eyes of Rod Brindamore? Ever. And he might not have ever done anything wrong, to be honest, but there's no way Rod would figure out a way to go, yeah, but that's because of something else. Maybe to his own detriment. It's just, he's a rock.
Yeah,
And
he's very much this era's Rod.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
So I had to put it on the list for that reason alone, but it was a pretty good trade.
Worked out.
It did work out. We're getting down to the final few deals here, and we're going to have some overlap at the top. But there's always something interesting to learn as we resume with Mike Sundheim's number 2 all-time transaction.
This is where I have the Ozolinsh trade.
Okay. Right.
Bringing in Brett Hedican, Kevin Adams. Previously discussed.
What did you think when they made that trade? Or did you not, because you were so young at that point?
No, I mean, I understood that a lot of people were frustrated with Sandus at that point. I admittedly didn't know a ton about the guys we were bringing in yet. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like something that made sense, and it certainly made Jim happy, which makes me happy.
It's just, I don't know why that makes me laugh, but it makes me laugh. All right, Luke, number 2.
Same trade for me, the Ozolinsh Adams Hedican trade. And I mean, I can say that at the time, I didn't realize what like a good guy Kevin Adams was. I mean, really one of the great guys to play for this franchise as it would turn out. A 2-time winner of the Joseph Wasacek Award for Media Cooperation. I think Jordan Stahl is the only other player who's won it twice. I mean, we try as a Professional Hockey Writers Association chapter not to give it out. We try to spread it around. I mean, that's deliberate, as we want to give as much positive reinforcement to the guys who are good with the media as we can. But sometimes it's unavoidable and inescapable. Kevin Adams is one of those guys. And I had always sort of like on NHL whatever drafted Brett Hedican because he was such a good skater in the game. And I had a scout tell me one time, if people would stop thinking of this guy as a power play guy just because he skates so well, then they're going to stop being unhappy with him, because everyone's like, oh, he skates so well. Why is he only putting up 35 points or whatever? And to his credit, both Paul Maurice and Peter Laviolette basically said, just go play, just go do your thing. And they didn't use him on the power play, and they didn't ask him to be an offensive guy. And it turns out that Brett Hedican was just a really smooth skating, sort of dependable defenseman who could move the puck. I mean, I think no one's going to confuse him for Brent Burns, but he could play in today's NHL without blinking because he could move so well, and he made a good first pass and all those things. So to take a guy like Sandus Ozolinsh, who was very polarizing, I don't think he was ever fully healthy with the Hurricanes. There was just a lot of hard miles there. And replace him with a super dependable guy who fit what you were trying to do under multiple coaches, as it turned out, and add a guy who, for a contending / winning team, Kevin Adams is just your perfect fourth line center. He only needs to play 8, 9, 10, 11 minutes a night. He kills penalties. He's a leader. His teammates like him. He'll go down and block a pronger shot and break his wrist and keep playing. I mean, he was just the kind of guy you need to win. And quite frankly, that 0-2 team, despite all of the guys who have since gone on into broadcasting and management and coaching and all of that, still had that sort of, there was at times an immaturity about it. And Hedican and Adams really helped sort of stabilize things. They were like the gelatin, the last packet of gelatin that goes in and lets the mold set up. There were plenty of leadership in that room, but adding those two guys for the next 4 years in 02 and 06 really, really stabilized things. So that's why I had that as number 2.
Yeah, Kevin was just as solid a person. Every time Rod talks about bringing players in, I think about the players that were in that room in 02 and 06, and they think character first. And in terms of what you are as a player, your character as a player, and the person also matters. I guess it's not 100% because sometimes you have to make some decisions that you're not 100% on board with. But Adams and Hedican, man, you couldn't have brought in 2 more solid human beings. Everybody has the same number 1, right?
I don't know that we do, but...
Oh, come on. Rod...
Somebody could have a different version of it.
Keith Primo for Jean-Marc Peltier.
Yeah, that's not my number 1. I think Mike and I probably have the same number one.
I do have the trade itself at number
See,
one.
I have the re-signing
Okay.
as number one.
Good for you. You're a little different part of that.
I debated it. I know where he's going with this, and he's not wrong. But
right.
I had the initial trade just because that's what initially brought him here.
I'm actually surprised, Mike. I figured Adam would have the trade and you would have the re-signing.
I have, I have Keith Primo, a 5th rounder for Rod Brindamore, a second round pick as well, and Jean-Marc Peltier. Okay, as the Hurricanes were getting ready to move into their new home, the Entertainment and Sports Arena it was called at the time, there was a pretty long and bitter contract dispute with Keith Primo, their captain. He was their leading scorer, their best player, arguably. And it was not fun times as the Canes were trying to put their best foot forward in their new home, and coming off a playoff bid and a division title, it just made matters worse. So Jim Rutherford put the word out that Primo, a big, talented, athletic center, was available for trade. And among several teams that were interested was Philadelphia. But if that was going to happen, there was one player that had to be in the deal.
Right away, we told them if there was a deal in Philadelphia, it had to be Rod Brindamore. It was twofold. They didn't want to trade him, and he was hurt. He had a broken ankle or a broken foot. And we said, that's fine. We'll just wait. We'll wait till it heals. And time went along. It hadn't totally healed, but we got to a point where Keith didn't return to the team. And we told Philadelphia we were going to make a move at that point, and we would take Rod, despite the fact he was still trying to get through this injury. And the key to that was we knew he was a good player, good two-way player, but also, again, it was the culture of our team and the leadership and those things that you need to win. And so it was a very important acquisition as history has shown.
You didn't know at the time that you were acquiring somebody who would essentially become the franchise, did you?
No, you never know that, but you know certain people have all the qualities to do that. And so anything that has happened in the past and what will happen in the future with Roddy, I'm not surprised about. This is, as we all know, very special person and just a phenomenal hockey guy.
Let's pick it back up with Luke DeCock of the News and Observer.
We're in Kitchener for rookie camp. The Brindamore deal is close. And Mike and I finish up as a practice day. We finish up and we get in the car and I think it was my rental car, and we drive to Toronto to go watch the Blue Jays play the Yankees.
Yep.
And we had to stop at a Kinko's in Mississauga so I could write up the Brindamore signing and get it in the paper and get it online.
A Kinko's.
Yeah, nice. I think it was whatever. That was
Beautiful.
Back in the days when they were called Kinko's. Anyway, the point is, and here's why I have it ahead of the trade. I can't argue with the trade, obviously. Rod Brindamore, when he got here, wanted to leave.
Yeah.
He's been pretty open about this over the years.
Yep.
What am I doing here? I've played in hockey markets. This is a joke. And this is going to get into important games later on. But he saw the potential here. And I don't think anything that's happened over the last 21 years, 02, 06, 09, the All-Star game, this resurgence after the post-Ron Francis, Bill Peters era, I don't know that any of that happens if Rod Brindamore doesn't take the leap of faith and say, this is where I want to be in the fall of 2001. It really, in a lot of ways, is more important than Francis, more important than the trade that brought him here, more important than anything else that's happened with this franchise, because his individual personality is now so threaded through every success this franchise has had. Yep. And it took that leap of faith at that point. If he had played out his contract, they would have traded him in January. He could have gone anywhere. To me, that's the single most important transaction in the history of this franchise.
Was Rutherford worried that he'd lose Brindamore to free agency?
Well, you always have that concern when you're dealing with unrestricted free agents. We always take chances, and some work out and some don't. But this worked out. I mean, he got here. He's like all the people in the triangle. They've either lived there their whole life or they moved there and they love the place. And that's what happened to Roddy.
He is the most important person.
No doubt.
No offense to Peter Karmanos, who brought the team here, Steve Stroud, who's got a street in between Carter Finley Stadium and the arena. We should just put, I don't know, statues of Rod at every intersection. Just do it.
Well, let's see him win something as a coach first.
Oh, chill.
We'll put the player statue out there now. We can put the coach one out when he wins one here.
There you go. Those are our lists. From Ron Francis coming via free agency to the trades for Hedeken and Adams and Stahl, signings of Whitney, and making the moves for Rod and Willie. Those are our thoughts. Just three guys who love the team. Thanks to Mike Sundheim and the Hurricanes and Luke DeCock of the News and Observer for their thoughts. But what about the favorites of the guy who made most of those deals? That's next, after the break. Before we go, we had our say, but which were the favorite trades or deals of Jim Rutherford?
If you look at Danny Markov's age at the time and getting a young player in Justin Williams, you know, that one, and of course the Brindamore one. Those two were a big reason that there's a Stanley Cup in Carolina.
Rod Brindamore and Justin Williams, two of the best, names both on the cup, and maybe they will be again. Next time, the best games in franchise history. This is the Canes Corner Podcast 25th Anniversary Special. I am Adam Gold. Thanks to Rusty Helzer. This is part of the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network. Give us a follow, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Canes Corner Podcast with Adam Gold.
Yeah, I want to drive the Zamboni. Yes, I do.
The Canes Corner Podcast is a part of the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network.